Saturday Night Live Studio 8H, the crowd was warm, the monologue was cruising, and then Colin Jost leaned in with a smirk and delivered the line that no one expected would detonate across continents. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two cute image of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry flashing behind him. The punchline landed not with polite chuckles, but a gut-level roar. One part shock, one part catharsis. In comedy, timing is everything. But here it wasn't just about timing, it was about permission. Because until that moment, Meghan had existed in a strange space in American media, too royal to mock freely, too Hollywood to protect unconditionally. But Jost's joke didn't just draw laughter, it drew blood. It pierced through the PR-crafted armor, signaling to the industry, to audiences, and most importantly to the internet, that Meghan Markle was no longer untouchable. By Sunday morning, the SNL clip had gone viral, not because of its humor, but because of its symbolism. Major headlines framed it as a cultural inflection point, a shift in tone. The Atlantic wrote, "The night the narrative flipped." Twitter, always a step ahead, took it further, resurrecting an entire archive Meghan's team had long tried to keep buried. Old yacht photos, pre-royal snapshots, grainy images from summers past long since scrubbed from Google results now reborn across Reddit, TikTok, and X threads. These weren't shocking in content, a bikini, a glass of wine, some familiar faces, but in context, because they weren't just images, they were receipts. Receipts that challenged the carefully polished version of Meghan many had come to accept: the wrong Duchess, the truth teller, the reinvention heroine. The problem wasn't the past. The problem was the edit, the airbrushing of origin, the erasure of inconvenient detail, the insistence on a single sanitized narrative. Overnight, what had been a protective shield became a narrative liability. The question wasn't, what has she done? It became, what has she tried to hide? And Meghan, who had built her post-royal presence on control of aesthetics, message tone now faced a storm she couldn't PR spin away. Trending hashtags shifted from admiration to irony. Hashtag from Yacht to Palace wasn't just mean, it was viral. Clips from SNL played side by side with the newly resurfaced photos, cut together with sarcastic commentary and Gen Z memes. Her image was no longer curated. It was crowdsourced, and worse, crowds were no longer sympathetic. For years, Meghan had walked a tightrope, half royal, half celebrity, all brand. She had held the narrative close, shaping each chapter with precision, from tell-all interviews to trademark jam jars. But comedy had done what commentary couldn't. It cracked the surface. It told the public, you can laugh now, and they did loudly, unapologetically, and without restraint. And then the photos began to spread faster than any press statement could catch. The images weren't new, they were simply unseen. Yacht parties, sunny decks, champagne flutes balanced on manicured fingertips, snapshots of a woman who once chased a different kind of spotlight. But now, reposted in rapid succession across platforms, they no longer looked aspirational. They looked curated, then covered up. Within hours of the SNL monologue, airing these photos formed the backbone of an entirely new narrative. Not of scandal, but of reinvention so aggressive it bordered on erasure. The issue wasn't that Meghan had a life before royalty, everyone did. It was that she had spent years meticulously rewriting that life, scrubbing timelines, deleting mentions, and framing herself as a wide-eyed outsider swept into a centuries-old institution. But the internet doesn't forget. It archives. TikTok creators began stitching timelines contrasting past interviews with resurfaced visuals. One clip from 2021, where Meghan called herself a quiet, private soul, juxtaposed with a 2014 paparazzi video of her waving to photographers on the Côte d'Azur. Reddit threads compiled side-by-sides pre-Harry influencer campaigns styled like magazine shoots versus the Netflix documentary narrative of being hunted. Suddenly, every carefully staged photo from recent years became suspect, not because they were false, but because they fit too neatly into a larger myth. The audience, once enraptured by Meghan's escape from the palace tale, now began to question the intention behind every chapter. Was it sincerity or strategy? Commentators pointed out the irony. Meghan had spent the better part of a decade speaking about truth, but seemed increasingly undone by it. The more she tried to control the story, the more the story slipped out of her hands. What had once been her shield control had become the trigger, and the public didn't rage, they didn't riot, they simply unplugged. Engagement dropped, video views slowed. Her name still trended, but under hashtags no brand would touch. But the backlash wasn't loud, it was silent and far more dangerous. In the weeks following the SNL joke, the silence became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the public shifting, it was the elite ecosystem Meghan had once leaned into, now quietly pulling away. Invitations slowed, group dinners thinned, Messages went unanswered. What was striking wasn't hostility, it was absence. Ellen, once one of Meghan's loudest public defenders, made no comment. The Clooney's longtime allies since the wedding didn't surface. Oprah, who had gifted her platform for the now infamous interview, offered no gesture of solidarity. It was as if the industry had received a silent memo. The brand is no longer safe. Behind the scenes, publicists and PR advisors began whispering the same three words: steer, clear, now. It wasn't scandal, it was fatigue. Meghan's narrative, always intense, always polarizing, had become too much to manage. For brands, her alignment triggered Reddit threads. For producers, her image brought TikTok skepticism. For fellow celebrities, her presence came with risk. By month's end, events she had financially supported quietly dropped her name from promo materials. A wellness gala she was once set to co-host replaced her with a rising Gen Z activist without fanfare. A charity event she'd planned to attend removed her from seating charts, not in protest, but in quiet recalibration. Hollywood's rejection rarely comes through headlines. It comes in the form of lost relevance, the call that doesn't come, the contract that expires, the room you used to be in, happening without you. At Archewell HQ, internal emails flagged engagement, cooling, a euphemism for what was becoming clear no one wanted to co-sign anymore. Internally, strategies were floated, maybe a relaunch, a soft pivot, a podcast rebrand. But externally, it was already done. Meghan was no longer viewed as a partner. She was viewed as overexposed, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Netflix, the couple's highest profile backer, had begun quietly reviewing its long-term strategy. Analytics painted a sobering picture. But before they could decide how to proceed, Meghan's SNL moment and the viral fallout gave them an unexpected exit ramp. And behind the scenes, Netflix had already made a decision she hadn't seen coming. The metrics told the truth that PR couldn't mask. Viewership on Meghan's projects had cratered. Internally, Netflix executives reviewed the dashboard and saw what they'd feared: her flagship documentary, which had launched with fanfare and a Vanity Fair spread, had dropped nearly 80% in viewership by its second week. Even worse, Suits reruns, the very series she'd once outgrown, were outperforming her latest efforts by a factor of 3. The Colin Jost moment, while culturally damning, offered strategic relief. It became the corporate excuse to recalibrate. Meghan's public narrative had become erratic. Archewell's ROI was flatlining. Quietly, they decided not to renew the broader creative development deal. There would be no season 3, no prestige docuseries, no platform-wide campaign. Instead, they'd offer seasonal, low-risk specials. Holiday fluff, Valentine's tips, Thanksgiving recipes, short, inexpensive, and entirely disposable. Her most recent episode, once pitched as an immersive holiday feature, was downgraded mid-production to a social clip compilation, a far cry from the immersive Oprah-style vision she had imagined. Even her passion project's personal essays, archival footage, culinary vignettes, were deemed brand dilution risks by Netflix's strategy team. Meanwhile, Harry's own content fared no better. His polo documentary, promoted with custom footage and luxury drone shots, failed to crack 500,000 viewers. Its most shared clip on social media, a meme of Harry falling off a horse. The Archewell brand, once poised to become a multimedia empire, now functioned more like a personal blog with corporate invoices, high production, low traction. Internally, even loyal staff whispered, "There's no clear audience anymore." In meetings with potential sponsors, the same question surfaced. What does she stand for now? No one had a solid answer. The feminist, the wellness icon, the media mogul, the activist, the duchess. Every identity came with contradictions, and TikTok, Reddit, and commentary channels had receipts for each. So Netflix, with its exit plan drafted and risk team nodding in approval, did what every savvy platform does in a brand fade. They waited. Let the contract expire, let the buzz dissolve on its own. It would be clean, quiet, and final. The final verdict came not from Netflix, but from the internet's new favorite sport, tracking her contradictions. The death of a public persona rarely arrives with headlines. It trickles down through the culture in whispers, edits, and stitches. And for Meghan Markle, the final verdict wasn't delivered by tabloids or Netflix memos. It emerged from TikTok timelines, Reddit receipts, and influencer dissections. Where once she commanded cover stories and exclusive interviews, she now found herself dissected in 90-second breakdowns, tagged with hashtags that weren't mean-spirited, so much as exhausted. The question was no longer, what is Meghan doing? But which Meghan are we watching this time? The misunderstood royal, the feminist entrepreneur, the wellness storyteller, the media disruptor? Each iteration came with a rebrand, a new logo, a curated video, and each one crumbled a little faster than the last. What remained was fatigue. Brand fatigue, message fatigue, Even her most carefully planned moments, a kitchen cooking scene in soft lighting or a charity visit with symbolic fashion choices triggered not engagement, but mockery. Commenters joked that she had become her own PR intern, always pivoting, never pausing, forever pitching, and the silence from her former allies was deafening. No one came forward, not to defend, not to explain, not even to subtly signal support. The internet didn't cancel Meghan, it ghosted her. And in a digital age where outrage fuels relevance and difference, is far more lethal. Worse still, Meghan's relatable attempts, barefoot gardening handwritten notes, berries in baskets now felt more like satire than sincerity. Not because she lacked the intention, but because the audience had already decided she was performing. Even authenticity, once her brand anchor, had been rendered suspect by repetition. And as her visibility declined, her legacy began to crystallize not as a cautionary tale of betrayal by the crown, but as an over-engineered project in identity control. She had tried to script her story too tightly, and in doing so, left no room for evolution. The result wasn't scandal, it was stasis. Across forums, threads began labeling her not as villain, not as victim, but as something rare, irrelevant. That in the end was the cultural verdict, not hated, not even mocked, just tuned out.